You've just landed on the Coolest People in the World podcast, a show that features stories of cool people doing really cool things. From business, art, and travel to lifestyle, mental health and family, and everything in between. Join host Krystle J Bailey as she introduces you to some of the coolest people in the world. Here's Krystle.
Welcome back to the Coolest People in the World podcast. I'm your host, Krystle J Bailey, and I am excited to bring you another guest interview with one of my good friends, Kyle Smith, today. What's going on, Kyle?
Oh, another great day. Glad to be here.
I'm glad you're here. I'm excited to dive in this interview with my good longtime friend, Kyle, who is a farmer and someone who really takes care of the people around him and the community around him, and someone that means a lot to me. So make sure you drop us a like on social media, the Coolest People in the World podcast. Give us a review wherever you listen to your podcasts, and tell a friend. So Kyle Smith, owner, CEO, creator, founder of Smith Poultry. Tell us a little bit about who you are.
A young man who was brought up by some older folks who tries to keep their legacy intact and move forward in a way of sustainability for my family and the world and everybody around me. So try to take care of home first, the community, and everyone we come in contact with.
So you are a black farmer, which is something, a specific niche that we're going to talk about. I want to talk about that. Talk to me about how you became a farmer.
Had kids, went to ShopRite. It was a little too expensive. I had an issue with that, and then I got fired from one job, and I figured in my head, what could I do to control the circumstances around me? Part of that was controlling my food. So I started controlling my food. That's how the whole farming thing came into play. I ordered some chickens online. They came to my mom's house. I had like 50 chickens in my mom's garage. It transpired into something that was really, really good. When things are working for you, like we're doing right here, things have always been working for you when you do stuff like this, right? Yeah. So you keep doing those and working toward those things. So with the farming thing, things were thumbs up and working. So I look back, I was like, oh man, I was actually prepared for this because my grandparents and things I was involved with and things I was around as a kid really prepared me to excel in what I'm doing now.
We talk a lot about this.
Yeah. You know, it's really about the things that are taught at school are not as valuable as things that are picked up along the way. More is picked up than I think is taught.
Yeah, absolutely. And the reason I brought up, and I'm glad you brought up the things you were taught growing up, the reason I brought up the black farmers, because things do come full circle and you are prepared, and you grew up with a grandfather.
Yeah, so my grandparents, they were from the South, New York City during that migration period. And then they had a house in Pleasantville, which is like, you know, little small town in South Jersey, right outside Lang City. Big thing back then, it was the racetrack and all that kind of stuff. So my grandparents had that transitional period, history, we ate beans and liver and stuff like that all the time. It wasn't like a lot of money. So being up Bronx like that and their lifestyle really culture who I am today, with things I do today, because those times they would have a certain person go around and sell food. Down south, you couldn't go to just any grocery store and get food. You couldn't use any bathroom back in the day, you know?
Right.
So they had guys who would go around town and sell produce. My grandfather did that. You know, he was a collard green man. So he would go to different people's houses with vegetables out of the farm and sell that kind of stuff. And I was always in the passenger seat doing that with him. My grandfather, he would put me in the dumpster at the peach farm when you go inside. And then he would grab 4 or 5 boxes of fresh peaches, but he would put me in there with a box, and I would get all the good peaches out the trash and they would throw away. You know what I mean? And then when we were on our way back to Lang City, I would box them up and bag them up, like, you know, 2 bad ones, 2 good ones in the bag and tie them up. But that was really a way to value add, because every peach wasn't for somebody to slice and eat. It was for pie, stuff like that as we go on. The people and the senior citizens in Lang City at the homes couldn't get that food. You know, there's still no real grocery store in Lang City, you know, so we're talking about back in the day with older African-American males and females didn't have transportation. So how did they get their food?
Right.
How did they stay nourished? How did they live their good life off of just the basics of corner stores? You know, did somebody really think about or count that in? So it was like those people who, you know, the guy who came around with the meat, the fish, and the vegetables, who were really important to the community. I'm glad that I was a part of that, got to be hands-on with the aspect of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And you were taught that at a young age. And we've often talked about the things we're prepared for as we don't realize we're being prepared for them.
Exactly.
And now you have CSA programs and you feed the community. So can you bring that full circle for us and what that looks like?
I've worked with a lot of different organic farmers in Edgewood Township and did a lot of stuff like that with different farms. And what I got to see was that eggs cost a lot more for me to produce than it does at the grocery store. So I can't compete with the grocery store. I also did see that my prices were too high for the people that really needed to get the eggs. So with the CSA program, we worked that out to where the people who paid for that got to really invest and get a good food at a good price it wasn't pushing them out by having the $4.50 a dozen, $5 a dozen price. You grow good food, but then only limited people are able to eat it.
Right. So how do you get the good food to everybody?
Everybody deserves good food,
Absolutely.
healthy food, fresh food, not something from out the country and been on a truck 3-4 days.
Absolutely.
So that was a way we got to fix that problem. Did the same thing with the crops in CSA in Atlantic City, where the CSA was, a certain price. Not everybody can afford that. But we added in the cost to that so that every like four or five CSA members was actually buying another membership for the family down the street who doesn't get to have that fresh food. Good vegetables.
Right. It takes a village.
That's it.
I love that. So I did a brief introduction of you, but can you give us the rundown of just everything that you are? Because I give the short version.
Kyle Smith, born in South Jersey, started farming at a young age. Went to school for auto body, turned that into working on aircraft right now. So I'm in the military full time. When I'm done that, I go home and raise my kids and keep my farm in check. We do a little bit of barbecue on the side with that too. We've been evolving, trying to just be the best we can and do what we do. And make sure the things we do that we're successful with, we keep doing those things.
And we talk a lot about legacy, and I talk a lot about legacy and time. And you have 5 beautiful children that help you on the farm. They're a part of the family business.
Yeah, like you said, it wasn't in my head to have 5 kids. I didn't have a number of kids, but actually worked out, like we were working today. I can see how those sharecropping families of the South had, like my dad's the youngest of 13, why they had so many kids, because the 5 hands were on ropes today, pulling the tarp on top of a building. 5 hands, there's 2 going over to the chicken coop, 2 going to the pigs, 2 going to the neighbor's house to help out doing certain things. So you had to have those extra hands to be able to get a lot more done.
So they're all hands on deck. Do any of them give you a hard time?
They gave me a hard time, but it was pretty cold today, but they were out there. Everybody bundled up and let's go.
And I've had the pleasure of meeting 4 of them, 4 of the 5.
Yeah.
They're feisty and smart and witty, and they know what they're talking about when it comes to farming and pigs. You guys do whole hog barbecues?
Yep. I wasn't expecting to be a pig farmer. I actually bought a house. The property the farm I bought was right next to another pig farmer that's probably been there that everybody knows in town. His pigs got out a couple times, put them back over there in the field. Next thing you know, the pig's in my yard again. I'm like, well, I guess I'll just keep the pig. That's how I started pig farming. And it was lucky that I deployed. I came back. He had passed away. His daughters had wanted me to keep up the property and everything like that. So I use his property now for my pigs. So that kind of like fell into our lap, and we've been successful with it. Calling myself a hog farmer, and the history for especially black farmers and myself with pigs in the South during, like I said, those sharecropping and, plantation slavery times. It's a lot of history and the ancestors that dealt with that kind of stuff and did that stuff before me. It's a lot to deal with and work through with that history-wise and all that. So something I embrace now. With that comes the whole hog barbecue, which was something that was big in the South. I never thought about it, but back in those times, they didn't have refrigerators. We look at cuts of meat because they can be refrigerated. Whereas back then, if you had to process an animal, you had a carcass laying there. You can't cut up and put in the refrigerator. You had to cook that whole thing then and there. The pig was also the one animal that was the only one that could really be cured and stored for the long haul. I worked with another black mentor farmer. I didn't know that back in the day, they for those sharecroppers and slaves out back in the day, they had a commissary on plantations, So it was like, we look at our grocery store, but back then it was a commissary. Yeah. And if you went to the commissary to get your shoes, they had everything, because the town might have been so many people, but there was no stores down there. So you went to commissary, and if you didn't have a piece of ham to go with your beans, X, Y, and Z, you had to go to commissary and get it. That was the money that, you had to try to make back over the summertime. Stuff like that really hits deep, because the pig is a very vital part of black history, especially black farmers. I think it's really big, and that's why with the whole hog barbecue, it really hits home for me to be able to do something that somebody's been doing ages back in the day down South.
Right. And give it to your kids too and continue.
Yeah, definitely. Because with my kids and my family, I try to go back down South and at least cook once a year to be able to get, every time I do that, I get some other.
It's always more than cooking.
It's always more than cooking. It's tending with the old guys down there and learning new things and just being around Charleston and, the cooks and chefs down in Charleston. Like, I got grits in my kitchen right now that are guinea grits. They were brought to the States, in the slaves' hair. And then, they brought their corn from Africa, brought to the States, and then went back to Africa and came back again. Something like kind of like the okra almost. So it was something that was important to them, especially to those ones that were on that coast like that. Grits was a big part of their livelihood, what they could eat, because it was such a product they could stretch and do. Grits, cornmeal, cornbread, many different things.
I love that you're keeping this history alive and teaching I mean, me teaching listeners, teaching us, and teaching your kids. And I love that you're so many beautiful different things. And that's the point of this podcast, is to bring people that, like I said, it's more about the cooking. It's more than the farming. It's bigger than that, and it's deeper than that. And so you are the epitome of what this podcast is about. The coolest people in the world. This is my friend, someone I went to school with, someone I grew up with, that has become, in my eyes, someone that is one of the coolest people in the world, doing what he is called to do, what he is meant to do, and keeping a legacy alive that you know you were called to keep alive. And your kids, I know, will be thankful for it. When you are in your everyday, in your day-to-day, in your art, in your craft, in your farming as a father, when do you feel most, I really am the coolest person in the world?
I think it really comes down to those moments when the sun's going down. I get to actually sit back and kind of look over things. I wouldn't say like the Lion King when he's looking over the pride. You know what I mean?
That's
like that
been my
mantra
mindset. I've been thinking about that
you know
lately.
I mean? But that's what comes to mind. We get to actually see your kids on a wrestling mat.
Yeah.
I was looking at some older grandfathers out there and really be able to see what you have in front of you and being able to just take a look at it and sit back.
I love that. And I've been talking about Pride Rock quite a bit lately, and kind of looking around. And you don't have to adventure too far when you realize what you've built and how much you've poured into your own life and the lives around you. You're like, I just kind of want to sit here and soak it in, and I love that.
Yep.
If you wanted to share one message from Kyle Smith that you wanted listeners across the world to hear, what would it be?
Take care of little things. Everything else will fall in place, and just be great every day. That's pretty much it.
Great every day. I like that.
That's it.
I love that. Well, thank you for being here.
No, thank you. I'm glad to be here to be able to share my little bit, to be able to inspire others that did the same thing before me.
To see you thriving the way you are is an honor and a joy to me, and having known you so long. So keep shining, keep being one of the coolest people in the world.
Thank you.
This has been another episode of the Coolest People in the World podcast. Be sure to follow us on social media, The Coolest People Podcast, and like us wherever you get your podcasts. Be sure to leave us a 5-star review.
You've been listening to the Coolest People in the World podcast with Krystle J Bailey on the new Pod City Podcast Network. Visit us online today at thecoolestpeoplepodcast.com.